The night the rain trapped us together, I learned that some storms are not accidents. Some storms come to change your life. I was driving back to Seattle from Portland after a long week at work. The sky had been gray all day, but I did not think much about it. In Washington, gray skies feel normal. I had music playing softly, and I was thinking about how quiet my house would be when I got home. Since my dad passed away 2 years ago, the house had never felt the same. It was just me and my stepmother, Laura, trying to live in a space full of memories. Laura and I were never close when my dad was alive. She married him when I was 23. I was polite to her, but I kept my distance. She was kind, but she was also young. Too young, I thought, to be my dad's wife. After he died from a sudden heart attack, everything changed. The silence in the house became heavy. We both felt it. That night, the rain started as a soft whisper on the windshield. Within minutes, it turned into something wild. The sky opened up, like it had been holding back tears for years. I could barely see the road. The wind pushed my car from side to side. Then I saw flashing lights ahead. A tree had fallen across the highway. Traffic was stopped. I checked my phone. No signal. I sighed and leaned back in my seat. The rain hit harder, loud and steady. After about 20 minutes, a state trooper walked by telling everyone the road would be closed for hours. There was a small roadside motel about half a mile back. That was the only option. I drove slowly through the storm until I saw the old sign glowing in the dark. Pine Creek Motel. It looked like something from an old movie. One long building, yellow lights in the windows, rain pouring off the roof. Inside, the lobby smelled like coffee and old wood. A tired woman at the desk told me there was only one room left. One? I asked. Yes, we're full because of the storm. I hesitated, then nodded. I'll take it. I grabbed the key and hurried through the rain. My clothes were damp by the time I opened the door. I stepped inside, shut it behind me, and froze. Laura was standing near the window. For a second, I thought I was imagining her. She turned around slowly, her long brown hair falling over her shoulders. She looked just as shocked as I felt. "Ethan?" she said softly. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice almost lost under the sound of the rain. "My flight got canceled in Portland. I rented a car to drive back to Seattle, but the road closed. This was the only room left." Quote, "We both looked around the small space. One bed, one lamp, one chair. The rain hit the roof so hard it felt like it was part of the room with us." I laughed nervously. "Of course, of all the motels." She gave a small smile, but her eyes looked different, softer, maybe tired. "I guess we're stuck," she said. I set my bag down and tried to think clearly. "You take the bed, I'll take the floor." "You don't have to do that," she replied quickly. "We can figure something out." I avoided looking at her for too long. Being alone with her like this felt strange. Since my dad died, we had moved around each other carefully, like strangers sharing a kitchen. We talked about bills, groceries, house repairs. Nothing deeper. But now there was nowhere to go, no work to escape to, no friends, just the sound of rain and the two of us. She sat on the edge of the bed. "It's been a hard year," she said quietly. I nodded. "Yeah. I know we never really talked about him," she continued, "about how we feel." I looked at her then, really looked at her. Her eyes were red, not from makeup but from crying at some point. Maybe not tonight, but recently. I didn't know how, I admitted. She took a slow breath. Neither did I. The storm outside felt endless. Lightning flashed, lighting up the room for a second before fading back into warm yellow light. "I keep thinking about how he brought us together," she said. "You and me. We're the only ones who really understand what we lost." Her words settled heavy in my chest. I had always seen her as my dad's wife, not as a person standing in front of me, hurting like I was. She stood up and walked closer, stopping just a few feet away. "Ethan, do you ever feel like things happen for a reason?" Quote. I swallowed. "I don't know." She glanced toward the window where the rain poured down like a curtain. "This storm! This room!" Maybe it's meant to make us finally talk. My heart was beating faster than it should have been. Laura, I started, unsure what I was going to say. She stepped even closer, close enough that I could see the tiny freckles on her face, close enough to feel the warmth of her body in the cool room. I don't want us to live like strangers anymore, she said softly. Life is too short. The words felt simple, but there was something else under them. Something I could not name yet. Thunder shook the building, and without thinking, she reached for my hand. Her fingers were warm, mine were cold from the rain. For a second, neither of us moved. The world outside felt far away. It was just us, standing in a small motel room while the storm raged. She looked up at me with a mix of fear and courage. Maybe this was meant to happen, she whispered. And in that moment, I realized the storm outside was nothing compared to the one building inside my chest. Her hand was still holding mine when the lights flickered again. For a moment, the room went dark, and all I could hear was the rain pounding against the roof and the steady sound of our breathing. When the lamp came back on, nothing had changed, but everything felt different. I slowly pulled my hand back, not because I wanted to, but because I needed space to think. My heart was racing in a way that made me uncomfortable. Laura was my stepmother. That word had always been clear in my mind. It had rules around it. Lines you do not cross. But standing there in that small room, with the storm trapping us in place, those lines did not feel as solid as they once did. She noticed the shift in me and took a small step back. There was no anger in her face, only understanding. She sat down on the edge of the bed again and looked at the floor for a moment. I'm not trying to make this strange, she said quietly. I just don't want to pretend anymore. I leaned against the wall and crossed my arms, trying to steady myself. Pretend what? That we're not both lonely, she answered. Her voice was soft, but it carried weight. I could not deny it. Since my dad passed, the house in Seattle had felt empty. We ate dinner at the same table, but rarely spoke about anything personal. Some nights I stayed out late, just to avoid the silence. Other nights, I would hear her walking down the hallway and wonder if she was feeling the same kind of ache. I never wanted to make things harder for you, she continued. You already lost your father. I didn't want you to feel like you had to take care of me, too. I looked at her. She looked smaller somehow, not in size, but in strength. The woman who always seemed put together, calm and steady, now looked unsure. I didn't know how to talk to you, I admitted. You were his wife. I felt like if I got too close, it would mean I was replacing him. She shook her head gently. No one could replace him. The storm outside grew louder, almost like it was listening to us. Water ran down the window in long streams. The air in the room felt warm and heavy. I miss him every day, she said. But I also miss feeling alive. Quote, those words stayed in the air between us. I moved from the wall and sat in the chair across from her. We were close enough to see each other clearly, but far enough to breathe. What do you mean? I asked. She looked at me carefully, as if deciding how honest she should be. When he was alive, I was his wife. After he passed, I became the widow. That's all people see now. They treat me like I'm fragile, like I'm finished. You're not finished, I said without thinking. Her eyes met mine, and something in them softened. You don't look at me like that. I felt heat rise to my face. I had tried not to look at her at all, not really, but there were moments I could not ignore. The way she laughed at a joke on TV, the way she tied her hair back when she cooked, the way she stood in the kitchen window with the morning light on her face. I didn't want to disrespect him, I said. You're not, she replied gently. Feeling something is not disrespect. It's being human. The room felt smaller as she stood and walked toward the small coffee maker on the dresser. She poured 2 cups, even though it was late. She handed one to me, and our fingers brushed again. This time, neither of us pulled away quickly. We sat side by side on the edge of the bed, our shoulders almost touching. The coffee was bitter, but it gave us something to hold, something to focus on besides the tension building between us. Do you ever think about leaving the house? She asked. I've thought about moving out, I admitted, but it feels wrong to leave you there alone. I don't want you to stay because you feel responsible, she said. I want you to stay because you want to. Her honesty was disarming. I realized we had never spoken like this before, not once in 2 years. Thunder cracked loudly above us, and without thinking, she leaned slightly into me. It was a small movement, almost natural, like she needed warmth. I could have moved away. I did not. Her shoulder pressed against my arm, and I felt the steady rise and fall of her breathing. The scent of her perfume mixed with the smell of rain drifting in from the cracks around the door. "Ethan," she said softly, not looking at me. "Yeah?" If the storm hadn't happened, we would still be avoiding this conversation. She was right. I turned my head slightly, and she looked up at me at the same time. Our faces were close now, close enough that I could see the reflection of the lamp in her eyes. "I don't know what this is," I said honestly. "Neither do I," she replied, "but I know it's real." Her hand slowly found mine again, resting gently, not pulling, not pushing, just there. The rain outside showed no sign of stopping. The world beyond that small motel room felt far away. For the first time since my dad's funeral, I did not feel like I was drowning in silence. I felt seen, and as she squeezed my hand softly, I knew that whatever this was, it was only beginning. Her fingers stayed wrapped around mine, gentle but certain. The rain outside had slowed from a violent storm to a steady rhythm, like the world was catching its breath. Inside the room, the air felt warm and close. I could hear every small sound, the hum of the old heater, the soft tap of water against the window, the quiet beat of my own heart. We sat there without speaking for a long moment. I knew something had shifted between us. It was not just grief anymore. It was not just two people sharing the same house. It was something deeper, something that had been waiting quietly under the surface. "I'm scared," I admitted finally. She turned to look at me. Of what? Of what this means, of what people would think, of what he would think. When I said that last part, my chest tightened. My father's face came into my mind. The way he used to sit at the head of the dinner table. The way he laughed loudly at his own jokes. The way he looked at Laura with love. She lowered her eyes for a second. I think about that too. The room felt heavy again, but not in a bad way. It felt honest. "I loved your father," she said quietly. "I still do. That doesn't disappear. But love is not a single box you fill once in your life. It changes. It grows. It moves." Quote. Her words were simple, but they landed deep inside me. "I never planned for this," she continued. "I never looked at you that way while he was alive. You were his son. You were family." "I know," I said quickly. "I never thought about you like that either. Not then. But after he passed, things changed. Not all at once. Slowly. In quiet moments. In small looks that lasted a little longer than they should have. In late-night talks in the kitchen when neither of us could sleep. "I think it started when you fixed the porch light last winter," she said, with a small smile. "You stood out there in the snow for an hour just so I wouldn't have to walk up in the dark." I laughed softly. That was nothing. It wasn't nothing to me. Her hand squeezed mine a little tighter. I realized this was not about one stormy night. This had been building for months, maybe longer. We had both been pretending not to see it because it felt safer that way. "What happens when the rain stops?" I asked. She looked toward the window. The storm had calmed to a light drizzle now. Cars were slowly moving in the parking lot. "We go back to Seattle," she said. "Back to the house." "And then?" She turned fully toward me, her knees brushing mine. "Then we decide if this was just the storm talking or if it was us finally being honest." Her closeness made it hard to think clearly. I could see the soft line of her jaw, the faint shine on her lips, the warmth in her eyes. There was no confusion in her expression now. Only courage. "I don't want this to be a mistake," I said. "It won't be," she answered gently. "Not if we choose it." The word choose stayed in my mind. This was not something happening to us. It was something we could decide. She lifted her free hand and slowly placed it against my cheek. Her touch was careful, as if she was giving me time to pull away. I did not. My breath caught in my throat. Her skin was warm against mine. I could feel the softness of her palm, the slight tremble in her fingers. "Tell me to stop if this feels wrong," she whispered. It did not feel wrong. It felt terrifying. It felt powerful. It felt like standing at the edge of something that could change everything. "I don't want you to stop," I said quietly. Her eyes searched mine one last time. When she leaned in, it was slow, giving me every chance to step back. I did not move. Our lips met softly at first, unsure, testing. It was not rushed or wild. It was careful, almost fragile. But as the seconds passed, the fear inside me began to fade, replaced by something warm and certain. The world outside the motel room did not exist in that moment. There was no past, no rules, no voices in our heads, just the two of us, choosing to stop pretending. When she pulled back, her forehead rested against mine. We both breathed slowly, like we had just run a long distance. "This changes everything," I said. "I know," she replied. There was no regret in her voice, only truth. I realized then that the storm had not trapped us, it had forced us to face what we had been avoiding. The real question was not whether it was meant to happen. The real question was whether we were brave enough to live with the choice we had just made. And as I looked into her eyes, I knew there was no going back to the silence we once shared. We stayed like that for a long time, our foreheads touching, our hands still holding each other. The rain outside faded into a soft whisper, and the world slowly began to move again. I could hear car engines starting in the parking lot, doors closing, people driving away. The storm was ending, but inside me, something new had just begun. Laura pulled back gently, searching my face. There was no doubt in her eyes now. Only calm strength. "We don't have to rush anything," she said. "We can take this one step at a time." I nodded, even though my heart was still racing. "Are you sure?" Quote, "I've never been more sure about being honest," she replied. Honest. That word felt bigger than everything else. For 2 years, we had lived in quiet grief, hiding our pain and ignoring the growing connection between us. Now there was no hiding left. The motel room suddenly felt smaller, like it had served its purpose. I stood and walked to the window. The clouds were breaking apart, and a faint strip of morning light touched the trees beyond the highway. The storm had passed faster than I expected. Cars were slowly lining up to leave. The road would reopen soon. "We should head back," I said softly. She came to stand beside me. Our shoulders brushed again, but this time it felt natural. Not shocking, not forbidden, just real. "Are you afraid?" she asked. "Yes," I answered honestly. "But not of us." She understood what I meant. I was afraid of the world outside that small room, the neighbors in Seattle, the friends who knew us as stepmother and stepson. The questions. The looks. "We don't owe anyone our story," she said gently. "We only owe each other the truth." I turned toward her. "What does that truth look like?" She took a slow breath. "It looks like two adults who found something unexpected after loss. It looks like choosing happiness even when it's complicated." Her strength surprised me. I had always seen her as someone fragile after my dad passed. But now I saw something different. I saw a woman who had survived heartbreak and still had the courage to feel again. "I don't want to hide," she continued. "If this is real, I want to stand in it." The sunlight grew stronger outside, shining through the window and lighting her face. For the first time since my father's funeral, she did not look like a widow. She looked alive. I reached for her hand again, not out of fear this time, but out of choice. Then we stand together. We packed quietly. There was no awkwardness now, only a calm understanding between us. When we stepped outside, the air smelled clean and fresh. The storm had washed everything clear. The drive back to Seattle felt different from the drive down. The sky was blue in places, and the road stretched ahead like a promise. About an hour into the drive, she reached across the center console and rested her hand on my leg. It was a simple touch, but it said more than words. I placed my hand over hers and kept driving. When we finally pulled into the driveway of our house, I felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. The house looked the same as always. The porch light I had fixed last winter still worked. The garden she planted in the spring was starting to bloom, but nothing inside would be the same. We stood by the front door for a moment before going in. The silence between us was not heavy anymore. It was steady. "No more pretending," she said softly. "No more silence." I agreed. Inside, the house felt less empty. The walls that once held only memories of my father now held something new. Not a replacement. Not a betrayal. Something different. Something that belonged only to us. That evening, we cooked dinner together for the first time in months. We laughed when I burned the garlic. We talked about small things, about work, about future plans. It felt simple and normal, but underneath it all was the quiet understanding of what we had chosen. Later that night, as we sat on the couch, she leaned into me the same way she had in the motel room. This time, there was no storm outside, no lightning, no excuse, just us. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring," I said. "Neither do I," she replied. "But I know I don't want to go back to who we were before that rain." I looked at her and realized she was right. The storm had not forced us into something wrong. It had forced us to see what was already there. I kissed her gently, not with fear this time, but with certainty. Outside, the sky was clear. And for the first time in a long time, so was my heart.